This evening, we have Steve Huff with us, who is doing a video for the town, which is basically providing the state of Matthews video. So he'll be doing some filming today. He also asked me to remind folks sitting at the dais not to look into the camera. So just keep that in mind. So I'd like to call to order the Board of Commissioners meeting for February 25th, 2019. Let the record reflect that the mayor and all commissioners are present. We'll do a safety minute first. We don't have a large crowd here today, but if we have to evacuate, we have stairs out to the right after you leave this room and stairs to the left. Go down the stairs, do not use the elevator, and meet out in front of the town building or back at the back of the parking lot. There's a defibrillator to the right of the reception desk out front. I checked it. It is good as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. And if you have any bags or anything, please put those up under your chair or push them under the chair in front of you. So if we do have to evacuate, everyone can leave the room safely. The invocation this evening, I'll call on Commissioner Chris Melton to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Mayor. The mayor always rotates on a schedule who offers the invocation. As we rotate around, some folks give historic prayers, some people give reference to sermons or various historical events, and one of the things I like to do is invite different people from different churches and religious backgrounds in Matthews. A couple of months ago, Larry Sands, a friend of our family who attends Temple Bethel, he came in and did a prayer. A couple of weeks after that, when it was my turn again, I invited Reverend Larry Whitley from Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. And tonight, or actually late yesterday afternoon, I texted Brent Watts, who's the lead pastor over at Abundant Life Church on 51, almost in Mint Hill. We kept him just in close enough to call him part of the Matthews family. But Brent leads a wonderful small church in Matthews, adds to the diversity of religious folks and that we have in to offer prayer. So I thought it important to invite Brent. So I'd like to invite Brent to the podium on my behalf to offer the invocation for tonight.
Thank you, Chris. And if you would join me by bowing your heads. Lord Jesus, we thank you for the opportunity this evening to come before you. God, you said in your word that when right people bless the city, that it flourishes and it's exalted. And I come tonight simply for a blessing for this city. I ask that you would bless these town council members and the related staff that are a part of this meeting. I pray that you would bless the businesses that are a part of this city. I pray that you would bless its citizens. I pray that you would bless the business that is before the council tonight and that you would give them wisdom as they go through the various aspects and debate the things that need to be brought to a decision. I ask for wisdom in all that's said and done. And again, tonight we pray your blessings upon this city in a wonderful way. We thank you for the city that we live in, we work in, that we are citizens of. And we ask all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next I'll turn to the manager. And do we have any items to be added to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Next item is public comment. I think we have two students here from Butler High School. Can you share with us what you're working on or what your class is that you're taking?
Learning civics and economics.
Okay.
We have a project to just go around with
Good. Well, welcome, and good luck and success with your project. And if you have any questions, feel free to address those either this evening, if you stay long enough, or via email to any of the commissioners or myself. Okay? Thank you. Public comment, we have one person signed up. Annie Schleinecker. I think I said that right. Annie, if you'll come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Annie Steinecker. I live at 533 Foxfield Lane in Matthews, North Carolina.
Okay, thank you. You proceed.
Hi, my name is Annie Steinecker. I have lived in Matthews since 2008. I'm 11 years old and go to Elizabeth Lane Elementary. Recently, I was assigned to do a TED Talk in school on a topic. I picked how plastic bags impact our planet, and ever since then, I've been inspired to change this problem. I am here to talk to you this evening about the environmental impact of single-use plastic bags, how these bags affect our local community, and what we as a community can do to make a difference. This year, 5 trillion plastic bags will be used. That's 160,000 bags per second. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a floating landfill of garbage in the ocean, is twice the size of Texas and is mostly composed of plastic. According to theworldcounts.com, plastic will only start degrading after 700 years and will only fully degrade after 1,000 years. This means all of the plastic that has ever been produced has not yet degraded. My generation has to be the one to clean up the mess, and I can hardly keep up with cleaning my room. I recently went to our local Harris Teeter on Matthews Township Parkway and found out that they use an average of 20,000 bags every week. This means in 1 year, our local Harris Teeter uses more than 1 million bags. Globally, only 1 to 3% of single-use plastic bags are recycled. Locally, here in Matthews, these bags are ending up in our streams and parks, and mostly in our landfills. I am here to propose that the town of Matthews consider a ban on single-use plastic bags by the year 2021. One way to do this is for our town to work with our local retailers such as Publix, Harris Teeter, and Target. By working together as a community, we can create awareness to change the habits of our local shoppers. For example, our local Target gives you 5 cents back for every reusable bag you bring to shop with. Maybe we can work with other local retailers to offer this incentive as well to create awareness. By working together, we can keep Matthews clean for your generation, my generation, and generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Very good point. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, item number 7A through F. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through 7F2.
Now, I'll second Jeff's motion.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is unfinished business. Consider cost estimates and contract for conceptual downtown streetscape design. And Mr. Jay Camp will be providing that update to us.
Good evening. At our meeting 2 weeks ago, you all had asked for a little bit of clarification on the proposed conceptual streetscape plan, and there were some concerns about overlap with an existing project which is going on, which is the crosswalk improvement at Matthews Station and Trade Street. As you'll see in the memo I have provided this evening, we don't feel there's going to be overlap. I've spoken with our town engineer, Susan Bean Woolard. That is a project, and in her words, it is a between the curbs project. I think I got that right, meaning that if you look at the cross-section here, this is actually a cross-section out of the 2016 streetscape plan. I think with the terminology, there's a little bit of confusion in what we're talking about. We talk about a streetscape plan. This document 3 years ago established items such as lane width, locations of parking, angled parking versus parallel parking. It told us how wide our sidewalk should be, but it stopped there. It didn't give us any detail for what the sidewalk should look like. The proposal before you this evening would give us actual detail on the design of the sidewalks, what materials would be used, as well as locations of plazas and seating amenities. And I have for you just a few examples. These are just images I grabbed off the internet earlier this evening of sidewalk streetscape projects in downtowns and what these could look like. These are improvement projects that added brick amenities, lighting, and then here's some just conceptual design work showing what the sidewalk looks like. But again, this proposal would primarily focus from the curb back to the storefronts within downtown. Again, just to recap on the cost estimate, I believe we came in at $37,500. This was a two-part approach. There's, of course, the core of downtown that we talked about at our meeting. It's in your agenda package. That encompasses Trade Street, East Charles Street, and Matthew Station Street. The larger figure, the $37,500, would take that project all the way to 51 on Trade and back down to the Greenway. And I would like to point out that one comment I made 2 weeks ago was that, if this is not, if the town's not going to be funding a project in the near future, that this is a project that could wait. I will say, though, that the incremental approach may work for us. If you look on the town's webpage today, you can see the streetscape project in front of Pizza Peel shows up on the front page. It's obviously a project we're all proud of, so we may take an incremental approach in the future. This would give us a design template to start working on improvements, potentially on a block-by-block basis, even if we don't endeavor to do the entire project all at one time at great expense. So that's all I have for you this evening as an update, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Camp? Mr. Higdon?
Jay, can you give a more comprehensive list or help us understand what the deliverables are?
Sure. And I apologize, I had a slideshow 2 weeks ago. Let me pull up the deliverables here. So from a deliverable standpoint, there will be a top-down, what I would call a 2D plan for this entire area. It's going to show you locations of curb cuts here, the sidewalk treatment, locations of, for instance, the brick planters that we already have in front of the Pizza Peel. Would we have those? Would we have table amenities, locations of street trees, species? So the top-down plan is going to give you that basic look for the whole area. There would also be a 3D, what I'd call a bird's eye rendering of just the core of downtown that would give you a sort of an angled view looking at the entire Trade Street streetscape area in a little bit better detail. But you'll really be getting more specifics on what all the elements of that streetscape would look like, the sidewalk design, where there's going to be brick, where there's going to be concrete. So it's conceptual design that we could use to take this to the engineering phase if we chose to construct the project.
Any other questions? Jay, will this entertain a solution for some of the stores that are on Trade near John, where we seem to have a curb step up and then another step up to the sidewalk level?
That is a good question, particularly on the, I guess that would be the west side of the street. In the 200 block, you've got the grade change in front of, for instance, Brakeman's and some of the other businesses there, where you've got the curb. And it's sort of awkward as a a visitor, when you get out of the on-street parking, it's sort of difficult. You have to shuffle up a grass hill to get up to the public sidewalk before you go to the business. So that is one item among many that this design would contemplate, and that two-level sidewalk as well that you're mentioning, that we'd be looking at solutions for how that should be handled. Could that lower sidewalk be widened, for instance? There's a little bit of a grade change there, and how that would be addressed. That would be part of a deliverable here. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. Jay, we had the intent, which was a previous document, to put together the elements that we would need to put together this document or these deliverables.
Right.
These deliverables would then, at project time, be given to the engineer to actually come up with the engineered construction documents, I'm assuming is what you would call them.
Yes.
Is there any cost savings or added cost to that by doing it incrementally? I realize we can't do it all at one time in downtown Matthews. Using $2019, is there any economy of scales by going ahead and getting some engineered drawings? Just doing it incrementally just, to me, seems at a higher expense.
And when I say incrementally, we would have a design in place. So you're asking about, should we construct the whole project at once or incrementally?
Or at least design the entire project at once.
Yeah, do you want to answer that question?
Hi, everyone. Wasn't expecting to speak, but I would like to address this because this is an excellent question, is why don't we just move to engineering right now? My take on it is let's let the experts do what the experts do. To me, this is a cost savings. Have Block do the streetscape, do these elements, and guide what then would become the engineering design, because maybe at project time, there's enough capacity in our engineering department that we just need to go out for a survey and we could handle the design. That would be an immense cost savings. That's something I think you are looking for us to do. We just don't have the capacity at this time. So I was excited about this opportunity that maybe we have the visionaries kind of do the streetscapey part, and then we can turn it over to engineer at a later date.
Okay,
That's fine.
thank you.
Mr. Higdon?
What sort of guidance are we giving Block? Are they just drawing pretty pictures of something that would look nice in Matthews? Are we telling them what we would like to see, or?
Yeah, so we've established, as I mentioned, I would believe a template with the initial project, which was a pilot project, but there would be input from staff as well as a small group of stakeholders to really let them know what our vision is. This is not just giving them wide open design criteria.
Mr. Urban?
Jay, has there been any thought in making sure that Block is coordinating with the environmental graphic designer for all the wayfinding and branding components that are used on the streetscape?
I mean, we can include that in the final contract if that's a concern.
I mean, I would think at least they would know what our position is and the colors we're using, the type of signage we're using, and things like that, and maybe there might be some coordination between him and I guess, I don't know if it's Kirk, Lowry, who are we on the, where'd Hazen go? Who's our current wayfinding branding guru?
Yeah, we've been working with Kurt.
Okay, so there'd be some dovetailing and conversations going on there. All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Got a comment.
Yes, Mr. Higdon?
I'm having a really hard time approving this, and I think I would probably have a better time if we did it as two separate projects, and maybe do the core area first, I believe it says 14,500, and I'd like to see what the deliverables are and make sure that I think it's worth the amount of money that we're spending to have conceptual drawings done, essentially. So my recommendation would be to fund the first part, let Block do the core area, take a look at their deliverables, and then decide if we want to spend another $23,000 for the remainder, rather than biting it all off in one chunk.
Okay, so if you were to make that a motion, can we put dates with when staff would come back to us with detailed information on the deliverables? So we need a motion to
Okay, yeah.
authorize the manager. So it sounds like you want to make a motion to authorize the 14,500.
Right.
and then have staff come back to us with deliverables for the additional 23,000.
I would actually like to see the results of the core area study for 14,500 before I be deciding whether to spend the remainder. So my motion would be to direct the town manager to enter into a contract with Block Design in an amount not to exceed 14,500 for conceptual streetscape design work in the core downtown area only.
Point of information, in the original motion, we did ask for 10% contingency, so.
Okay, with a 10% contingency.
Okay.
So that would total 15,900, I believe.
Right, yes.
15,950. Okay, so the motion's on the floor to authorize the manager to enter into an agreement with Block, a total of $15,950. Do we have a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Miller?
Thank you. Unfortunately, the core area that would be covered here is the area that's already kind of decorated, but has 2 curbs. The areas in need are more to the Greenway or perhaps to 51, although up to 51 is a little bit newer already. It's hard to, for example, from the Greenway to John is 0 treatment other than what we've had for many, many years. That's in need more than anything else, and I think if we're going to start with a clean slate or new ideas, it'd be easier and more relevant to have it in the area that's in need rather than the core area that's pretty already.
If the core area is not in need, then why are we spending any money for it?
Well, it's in need, but it's ahead of the other 2.
Any other comments? Mr. Urban?
The reason for my supporting this motion is I don't have a problem, being in the design profession, to phase something is not a horrible inconvenience, and if Mayor Pro Tem feels more comfortable in phasing it, basically, I don't have a problem with that approach. I think what will happen, though, is that the contingency will get eaten up because the remobilization of a design team to get back into a project, if you see the deliverables and you go, hey, this is great, move on to second phase, I think it wouldn't be a problem. But if you take the deliverables and wait 6 months, you'll lose that contingency. You may have an additional cost in the phase 2, but I look at this as simply, it's not just a downtown streetscape conceptual design, it's a design guideline. It is something that will last for 15 or 20 years and be on the books as a guideline for future development. Anybody that builds or renovates or infills along that area. The core, to Commissioner Miller, you may feel the core is decorated up, but frankly, I think it's piecemealed at best. And so I think we need to consolidate our effort, get that defined, get it down on paper. So I'm willing, out of the goodness of sort of a compromise here, is let's get the first phase done. I think you're going to be extremely pleased with the deliverables because I'm very familiar with Block's work. I think it's a lift above what we've seen in the past from deliverables of other firms, and I think you'll immediately sort of want to move into phase 2.
Mr. Melton?
With respect to the Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioner Urban, I'd like to offer a substitute motion. I see one of the items Commissioner Urban pointed out is with a contingency, you may have scope creep, you may have phases that overlap each other, and I trust Susan and CJ and Jay well enough to know they've vetted this, they've spent the town's time, effort, and money probably exceeding the value of the contingency already in getting this ready and vetting it for us. So I feel this is something we need to go with. We've kicked the can down the road. We've talked about it, I think, even since I was on planning board. I've seen that come up, and it's time to do something. I mean, talked earlier this weekend about how slow government can be sometimes, and it's no one's fault. I know the manager says that's democracy, and I can respect that, but I think it's time to get off the pot. So I'll make a motion that we approve and allow the town manager to enter into a contract with Block Design in an amount not to exceed $41,250 for conceptual sidewalk design work in the downtown area, as indicated in Jay's memo to us dated February 20, 2019.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's been a substitute motion made by Commissioner Melton and seconded by Commissioner Query. Just one correction to that conceptual streetscape design. I think you said sidewalk design, but it's inclusive of the streetscape. Just a point of clarification.
Yeah, it's in our memo as sidewalk, but I'll substitute streetscape for sidewalk.
Okay. So so there's the substitute motion. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Miller?
Thank you. Again, elaborating to the core area being the only to be studied, what I'm afraid is if the consistency we're looking for, certainly I don't want bump outs further up and down the street. I'm not a big fan of the bump outs, and if we're going to start with the core area, I don't want to replicate that. It's been a challenge there, so I support the full project.
Any other comments? I'm going to support the full project as well. I think this is something that we've talked about a number of times, and we all know that there's issues up and down the street of inconsistency that we want to get straightened out, and it's not going to do it by itself, and we need some professional input and then move forward with the expenditures to make that happen. So I will be supporting this substitute motion. Okay? No other comments? Though this is a vote on the substitute motion to direct the town manager to enter into a contract with Block Design in an amount not to exceed $41,250 for conceptual streetscape design work in the downtown area. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Let the record reflect that Commissioner DeMint, Commissioner Query, Commissioner Melton, and Commissioner Miller and the mayor are vote in support of the motion. All those opposed, Commissioner Urban and Mayor Pro Tem Higdon vote in opposition. So the substitute motion does pass. Thank you, Jay. Okay, move on to item number 9, new business. We have a revision to the stormwater regulations. We have Rusty Rozelle with us this evening. He is the Water Quality Program Manager with Mecklenburg County. Susan, are you going to speak first?
Yeah, I would like to do a quick introduction if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
The county came to staff, as you saw in the attachments, and asked if we wanted to support efforts to revise this legislation, which severely limits our ability to require some stormwater controls and redevelopment. Because of the legislative nature of this request, staff felt most comfortable bringing it to you for consideration and direction, which is why we didn't go off on our own and do this. When faced with presenting this information to you, I got a little worried I would not be able to answer your questions. And so fortunately, Rusty has graciously agreed to come. He'll give maybe a 5 or 10 minute talk about what this is and what it means to us, and then feel free to ask him those deep probing questions that I know you'll have after he talks.
Thank you, Susan. Welcome, Rusty.
Oh, thank you for letting me be here. It's good to see y'all. Well, y'all are probably familiar with the significant impact stormwater runoff can have on our communities, particularly in our streams. Whenever you remove natural vegetation and replace it with hard surfaces like asphalt roads, parking lots, rooftops, you increase the amount of water that enters our streams. To give you an example, an acre of trees, even in the Piedmont, we have this clay soils, an inch of rain on that produces no runoff. pretty much soaks down into the ground and goes into the groundwater. If you take off those acre of trees and put down an acre of asphalt, that same 1 inch of rain produces 27,000 gallons of water that hits our storm drain pipes and then rushes down to our streams really hot in the summertime. Then it picks up all these pollutants that have been deposited on our hard surfaces, fertilizers and so forth and so on, gas, oil, drippings, antifreeze, metals from tire wear, so forth. So we got 50,000 acres of hard surfaces in Mecklenburg County. That equates to, over a course of a year, about 57 billion gallons of stormwater, which is enough stormwater to fill Panther Stadium 236 times. So that's a mess. And it's hitting our creeks and it's scouring out the bottoms. It's causing temperature problems in the summer. It's putting a lot of pollutants in our surface waters, and it's causing flooding problems, a lot of flooding problems. And so this is a big issue in urban areas all across our country. And urban areas all across the country are required to have programs in place to address the negative impacts from stormwater pollutants. We call them Phase 2 stormwater permit, or stormwater permits. They're issued by the state of North Carolina. They're required by federal and state law. And one of the requirements of these stormwater permits that we all have, the county has one along with all the towns, and the city of Charlotte has one as well. One of the things we have to do to meet the permit requirements is to have requirements in place so that new developments have to put in measures like ponds or other measures to collect stormwater runoff and treat it so that that added volume and velocity and those added pollutants aren't causing the significant negative impacts that they would normally. And those are called post-construction ordinances because they're requirements for installing measures during or after post-construction. And in Mecklenburg County, the county led the initiative back in 2004 and 2005 to adopt these post-construction ordinances. We did it through a consensus building process, 50-50 environmental community with developers. We had some very specific goals in place. One of them was to try to address the existing impairment. So I said we had 50,000 acres of built-upon area, and we didn't quite have that much in 2004 and 2005, but we had about 40,000 acres, and we had almost all of our streams in Mecklenburg County are impaired or polluted because of stormwater runoff. So when we went through this stakeholder process, one of the things we wanted to do was to address those existing impaired streams. So we went above and beyond the minimum requirement of the state and federal law, and we required that as projects redevelop, in other words, when you remove existing impervious area and you replace it with new development, that you have to put in stormwater controls. Now that's significant, but how do you fix flooding problems and how do you fix already degraded streams unless you do that as sites redevelopment? So that was kind of to bring these old constructions, old built-upon areas up to a new standard for protecting our streams from water quality and flooding. So that went in effect in 2007 in the town of Matthews and in all the other towns. The ordinance went into effect in 2008 in the city of Charlotte. And for the past 10 years, there's been considerable development in the town of Matthews and in the city of Charlotte, and there's been considerable development. So the impacts of the ordinance, we can't really say for sure, but you would think they would be negligible with regards to preventing development from taking place. Well, then on December the 7th of 2018, at the end of the state legislative session, a new law went into effect. It was called Session Law 2018-145, and what it requires is that you cannot require stormwater controls on built-upon area that existed before the ordinance went into effect. In other words, what it's saying is we can't require that those measures be put in place to address that increased volume and velocity from existing impervious areas that caused all that impairment to begin with. And this has a huge impact on our community, probably more so in the Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham area, because we have so much existing impervious area that needs to be treated. So the city of Charlotte is kind of leading the way. They had this on their legislative agenda to go before the legislature to see if we can get some changes made to allow some more flexibility at the local level for these stormwater controls. And I asked all the towns to let the county know what it wanted to do. Did it want to join in this effort? And if they do, then we certainly want to try to participate with the city of Charlotte moving forward. So what does this mean on the town's part? Don't really see it as meaning that you have to do anything other than to just kind of indicate your support in moving forward to try to have changes made to this new legislation that it would allow some local flexibility in dealing with our post-construction stormwater issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Mr. Miller?
Thank you. Rusty, so this new regulation, it applies when someone, if I have a house without a garage, and I add a garage or add an addition to the home, then I need to have, what is it called, PCO? Post-construction ordinance is in effect. But if there is no change to the footprint, it wouldn't matter, correct?
Well, in the town of Matthews, nothing happens until you exceed 20,000 square feet of disturbance. So if you're a single-family residential development, it wouldn't apply to that.
Okay.
We're talking mainly commercial and larger residential apartments, condos, and that kind of thing.
With a parking lot?
Yes, sir. So if you had a building and you completely demolished it, you took it all the way down, you removed the foundation, you removed all the asphalt, and you built it right up from the dirt, and you exceeded 20,000 square feet of impervious area, then you would be required to put in these stormwater controls. That's the way it was in the town of Matthews.
Okay.
The way it is now in the town of Matthews is you can't require anything additional to what was already there if you don't increase the amount of built-upon area that was already there. So if you have an acre, let's say you have an acre lot and you add you have 3/4 acres of existing built-upon area, and you completely remove it down to the ground and you build it back on that 3/4 acres, and you don't go anymore, then you don't have to do any added stormwater controls. So the point there is that all that volume and velocity of water that's been hitting the storm drain pipes, that's been accumulating along with all the added development downstream, will never be mitigated. It will never be addressed, ever, because of this legislation, because you can never go back and treat it. You can never go back and require a developer to treat it. It will always go without any increased treatment into our surface waters.
And if I can ask a follow-up, you called upon an acre of trees, and even though it's clay, it would absorb into the groundwater versus a parking lot with the sediment and the pollution and the runoff. How does that same acre compare if it was gravel? Does gravel perk, or?
Gravel, unless it's properly laid with a sublayer, that, in other words, gravel packs pretty hard. You're probably aware of that. When it rains, if it's like Crusher Run with a topping of number 67 stone, which is what a lot of people do, and it packs down, it's just as hard as asphalt. But if you put a sublayer under there that allows the water to filter down through the gravel into that more porous sublayer, then it will have some permeable effect. And there is state legislation that allows for that, where you can put in gravel and use those techniques, and it does not count as impervious area.
Thank you.
Mr. Higdon?
And speaking for myself on this topic, I think the legislature's been overly zealous in removing local control, and anything that would bring local control back to us is just common sense, and I would fully support letting us control our own destiny as far as stormwater runoff.
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion that we partner with Mecklenburg County to modify the legislation to provide more flexibility for the town concerning stormwater controls.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion or additional questions for Mr. Rozelle? Mr. Urban?
I have no problem in supporting the motion, but what I'd like to have, for purposes of parity, is I'd like to have an understanding from the state is the rationale as to how they put the A through Z on from this aspect of it. I really would like to sort of have an understanding, you know, and my guess is probably a developer-driven situation or something like that, but there might be an aha moment in that, but I just, we get up here a lot of times, we get all revved up and we go through these motions. I really like to sort of see what the third story is to some regards, just for the sake of argument, but I do support the motion.
I can tell you what I know, and that is that this legislation went to committee, and before it went to committee, this provision, which amounts to about a sentence, was not in the law. When it came out of committee, it was in the law, and it was placed on the floor for vote only. There was no opportunity for debate, so nobody could ask why. And so the bill is fairly large. It has a lot of stuff in it, and this was just kind of tacked on to the end. No opportunity for debate, just had to vote, up or down, and it got voted up. So that's all I know. I don't know who had it put in there or why, but we may never know. But that's how it happened. And I think one of the concerns for us is it would have been good if there had been a debate and a little more information. It did get vetoed by the governor, and then it was overturned in the legislature by, 2/3 majority, I think, and became law. So,
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rustin.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, 9B, is consider Cruise Recreation Center rental request, exemption to allow alcohol on the premises. Corey King.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. We have a prospective renter that approached staff about a rental on April 19th. The ask is to allow presence of alcohol on the site that will be part of a religious ceremony that they would, I guess, include as part of the rental. I guess some of the details, they would follow what we have established with the other facilities in the department. They would have to have an approved alcohol permit that works through our Matthews Police Department and with background check and so on and so forth. I guess this is the step to ask for that permission to take that next ask to have the permit.
Okay, Mr. Milton.
Thank you, Mayor. Corey, the permit from the Matthews Police Department, is there also going to be a requirement for them to pull a permit with the Mecklenburg County ABC? Or is that not a requirement because they're not selling it?
Correct. They're not, it's not, what you're describing is mostly what we would do like in the park with the groups selling the alcohol.
Right.
This is just simply to have it available for the attendees on site.
And as a real quick follow-up, if I may, you said staff is prepared to supervise the rental if this is approved. Is there a cost associated with that? And the reason I'm asking is, this is not an organization, it's an individual that's making this request. Is staff going to be responsible for policing this, making sure that underage folks aren't given alcohol? Is that going to lie on us or the requester?
That's going to be on the requester. Our staff, we would, when I say we're prepared to supervise it, it'd be at the same level as if it were simply a birthday party. We will make this available, make the space available, and monitor, say, the behavior on the site. But I guess the other aspects will be on the renter.
One more follow-up, if I may. This is it for now. If the requester is distributing alcohol to someone who's under 21, and it's on a town property, it's being supervised by the town, if there is an unfortunate circumstance, an accident, somebody gets sick, is the town on the hook for any of this, or is it solely on the requester?
It is on the requester. Part of the They signed the same rental agreement that all the others use, and the town is indemnified in that agreement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Corey, if I look at what's been submitted and I reflect to the date, I believe that this is a religious service or multiple services on Black Friday, a couple days before Easter. Is that correct?
Good Friday.
To be honest, I did not look at it, I guess with respect to the holidays on the calendar, but that does seem right in line with where Easter is.
Yeah, I'm coordinating something else, and it's right after Tax Day, and it's Easter weekend. So I believe this is a religious service where it's going to have wine and bread to be broken, so to speak. So I don't suspect that anyone would be overserved. That's an assumption. Based on that assumption, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the exemption to the town ordinance allowing consumption of wine in Cruise Recreation Center as part of a rental request taking place on April 19th from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m.
You have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? I would like to ask a question, and I didn't, as I read through this in the package, it didn't really occur to me until Mr. Melton said something, but typically in every church in Charlotte when communion is done, people under age of 18 do consume alcohol. So I'd ask Mr. Buckley, what kind of position is that putting us in relative to the?
That does not violate ABC regulations.
Okay, so it would not be a violation.
Because it's a religious service.
Okay, and even though it's on public property, that doesn't make any difference?
That doesn't change the fact that it's a religious service.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously, or excuse me, motion carries with Commissioner Melton voting in opposition. Okay. Next, item 9C is commercial activity in public parks, revised ordinance discussion, and this is Mr. King as well.
Yes. So the town of Matthews, along with many other cities and towns around the U.S., they're dealing with ways to, say, manage certain things that are happening in parks. Essentially, what we're going to term as commercial activities being delivered in public spaces. Most of the concerns deal with maintenance, certain impacts to the facility, the turf, use of unrecoverable use of the utilities and such on the sites. From the perspective of most of the cities and towns, it is something that is seen as an unfair benefit. The organizations receive compensation from individuals, but then are using public spaces and hence their overhead, rent, utilities and such, they are not being forced to pay those. Different strategies have been taken to manage it. Some places will have a permit process in place where it's an application fee and then the associated permit fees. Some have just simply made it prohibited the activities on the site. And I guess tonight I just want to have that discussion about how we feel about it, what steps you guys feel we should take to manage what we're seeing in the parks. From staff perspective, it is something that we should manage a little more effectively. We have proposed a permit process where these groups would be forced to secure a permit, but then also the bigger part is having some skin in the game. They have to come through our department. We have all the information about the organization and times and schedules of what's going to be going on in the parks. Again, simply to ensure that they are partnering with the town and not just simply being on the site. We talked, well, one proposed way to manage it, again, is to have this commercial activities, commercial recreational activities permit in place. I promise the acronym was not deliberate, but to have that in place with proposed $25 per hour fee. And this will be something that they would have to, again, work with our staff and have in place before they will be able to use any of the park facilities. And I guess at that point now, I want to hear a little bit of discussion.
Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. I may have been the one to encourage the manager and Corey to bring this discussion to us, and it was because I noticed on multiple occasions during the week, multiple times a day, fitness groups were conducting boot camps in Stumptown Park while charging what some citizens told me was, I'll edit their definition of it, but a bunch of money to take this class. And when I started riding by, taking a look at it, it was literally every day during the week, in the evening, and sometimes in the morning, and I think that's an abuse of the system. They're using our parks as their venue to conduct fitness classes, to charge money for, that the citizens have paid for, and the citizens are on the hook for. And the second reason I wanted to bring it up, and I got passionate with Hazen about it, was these guys are out there in the evenings, all for fitness and folks going out and having a good time in our park, but they're exercising, doing boot camp type exercises via the headlights on their car illuminating the park, or via a lamp in the middle of the park. It's been dark outside and they've been out there doing it. And the more I saw it, the more it aggravated me. That's my park as much as it is his. He's out there charging money for people to exercise in his boot camp, and I didn't think it was fair to the citizens of Matthews. I didn't think it was fair to Corey's department and Public Works to have to go out and maintain the park, clean up after the park, put things back that they may not have taken care of. But I would just say no. Every time somebody comes in the park for a nonprofit fundraising, it has to come before us for approval, and it's far and few between where it comes to us. But I just think this is an abuse of the system. Somebody's taking advantage of a good thing that the town is doing, and they're making money off of it, and I don't like it.
Mr. Higdon?
Yeah, when I saw that the recoup amount would be $4,000 to $5,000, I can't imagine that it's worth the effort of permitting folks to work out in the parks or whatever. I haven't seen the great abuse that Commissioner Melton talks about, if that indeed is the case, if somebody's really abusing it. I've seen 7 or 8 people exercising. I don't think they're doing too much damage to our park, and we know that any permit fee is going to be passed right along to the folks that are exercising. So to regain $4,500 to $5,000 annually, it's not worth the amount of effort it's going to take to run the program, so I would not be in support of permitting it.
If I could also share, I think I shared this with you guys before when we maybe talked about it, maybe during another topic, but they were paying the park, well, they were securing a park use permit. So essentially they were renting the park to deliver these services. But at some point, we'll say that they saw what, I'll say the group that we're specifically talking about, saw an opportunity, and that rental ceased. We do think inherently the activities that are going on in the park, there are things that we support as part of the mission of the Parks and Recreation Department. We certainly want people outdoors and exercising, and if that's the only way that they feel motivated to get out in the park and move is just to pay these guys whatever that amount is. We certainly support exercise and being out in the parks, but again, I think we feel the same. That is, say, receiving some form of unfair benefit by the organization to just simply use the park, we'll say, for free.
Ms. DeMint?
Corey, have we had much abuse or damage to the parks? Has that caused your parks? Is it just Stumptown that they're doing it in?
The ones that we've seen are at Stumptown. And, conversations with staff, there's periodically, some groups that meet out at Squirrel Lake Park. And we can't say for certain, some things may be part of some paid, something to participate as a program in the park. But of course, the most visible one is the one at Stumptown. Damage-wise, I think to date, I'll say Public Works has not indicated to me that there's been excessive damage, say, to the stage. We have since turned the electricity off, as you mentioned, with the headlights to illuminate the park. So I guess the loss of cost for utility costs has ceased. But as far as damage to the turf, for this form of use in the park, the turf damage is not that great.
So if I could ask a follow-up, what would the cost and stress to your staff be to try to enforce something different? Would that cause you more work than allowing the public to use a public park?
Now, the creation of this, separate permit was just simply staff's renaming something that we already have in place. The park use permit process is there. It's something that we have it down. I think we're pretty efficient with it. It would just fall into line with what our staff handles with the birthday rentals and everything else that we do. So as far as, I guess, additional work, then, there may be a few extra, say, pieces of paper and phone calls to make, but I think we're pretty efficient with it.
Mr. Urban?
Corey, the car headlight thing is an interesting little dichotomy here. This seems a little odd. I mean, I would think that, okay, you can go into any public park you want after dark, but it seems to me that seems to be a stretch, and I don't know what we have on the books or whether there are laws or anything like that, or you have to amend that, or how you regulate that. But what you're telling me is, so it gets dark, and so they pull vehicles in there, they're turning their headlights on in order to continue using the park as if it was illuminated.
The groups have done that now. Yeah, now technically, the park's closed at dusk.
Okay, well, then I'll stand correct. Okay, so if it's dusk, then I don't know how much manpower we have. I mean, the police are stretched in as it is, but technically, so they're in violation of that particular item.
They are. But now with a rental, it would be for the agreed, whatever time slot, that would be part of any rental agreement. So it could be rented.
Does the rental agreement go beyond dusk?
In our procedures, it lists available times, I'm going to say through 9 o'clock.
Okay.
But as a general statement, parks open from dawn to dusk. So you could rent the park, say, I guess dusk changes, given the whatever time of year, but you could rent the park beyond dusk with a rental agreement or a park use permit.
Okay, all right. And the last thing is, are we just talking that this is all attributable to one particular party, or is this multiple factions?
Well, frankly, it is one group that we've observed more often than any others. We wouldn't say target any group with any change in ordinance. I think philosophically it is something that we want to, even if it is only one group now, we want to be a little more proactive and address it. Because what we've seen in, say, around the country, it is something that's it's pretty frequent in a lot of parks.
So are there actual policies that you can refer to in other jurisdictions and municipalities throughout the country and how they're addressing this?
There are.
Corey, let me ask you a question. I think I heard you say that the group in particular was renting the park and then saw an opportunity and stopped renting the park and decided to come after dark to do that.
Well, they were just using it during the, I guess the same hours.
But they just chose not to rent it.
Correct. And,
Okay.
we had the conversations with them. I do believe, I'll say staff, me reading the ordinance, was not comfortable just saying, you guys can't be in the park. It was, in my opinion, I think that could be challenged the way that our ordinance is written if we were to, say, kick them out of the park or prohibit them from using it without some change in the language.
Okay, so if the park closes at dark and they're there after dark and they haven't rented it, you're saying that the ordinance won't allow you to ask them to leave the park?
Well, now, for the after-dark sessions,
Okay.
certainly falling within our park rules.
But the part where it's during the day,
Correct.
they haven't rented the park, and our ordinances don't allow you to check their permit and see if they've rented the park or not?
It is, say that one more time.
If they rented the park, you should be able to walk up and ask to see their permit to rent the park.
Correct.
Okay, and if they don't have one, I think you're saying our ordinances don't allow you to ask them to leave? Is that correct?
If they're not being disruptive, it could be viewed as the same as just a drop-in group, the way that I read the ordinance, the wording.
Okay, well, I'm struggling with, if somebody's just gonna go to the park and use it and not rent it, and then we're gonna talk about a $25 per hour prepaid fee, I have little confidence that they're gonna pay that either. So I'm struggling with, I wanna step back from this and really understand the issues that we're having just in general about renting the park out. I mean, typically park rental is to make sure you got a picnic table or a shelter or someplace to hold your event. But anybody can walk into Stumptown Park, sit on a bench and read a book.
Right.
Anytime they want to. So I'm struggling with that aspect of policing the.
And I guess what differentiates this group, well, this use of the park is the commercial recreation aspect of it. This is an organization, and I say organization, I mean they are organized. They have a fee structure where these people essentially, I mean, it's quote unquote a business operating in the park. And I guess that would be the difference in somebody just dropping in, reading a book, or even coming and having a birthday party without renting the park. I'll say that's what separates, say, that user, from this type of use.
Okay, so what I'd ask is that we go back and examine the aspect of the ability to ask someone to leave the park when they don't have a permit and they're clearly impacting the use and pleasure of that park for the general citizenry because they're there. And it sounds to me like that's a problem in and of itself, that you can't ask somebody to leave who hasn't rented the park and they're impacting the general public's use of the park. Is that true? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, the ask is, discussion about changing wording in the ordinance to sort of outline exactly what you're describing.
Okay. Are you going to be working with them? on
Well, I
that?
will work with them, yes.
Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
Okay. Mr. Cordy?
You just answered my question when you asked our attorney, because I thought maybe he needs to read the park statements and the way it's done and see if you really do already have the right to do that, and if not, then I think he would be obliged, I hope, to change that to where we would.
Yeah, the attorney and I have talked a few times about it, and I guess we're at maybe one or two versions of the wording, potential wording for it. But yes, we'll certainly look at it.
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Higdon.
Just a few comments. I recall a time when a young lady came before this board and asked to rent Squirrel Lake Park for a wedding reception, and we turned her down, and alcohol was going to be served, and I don't think that was the problem. The problem was that it was going to extend into nighttime, after dark, and we said, you can't do it because it's at dusk. So I don't know why, at Squirrel Lake Park, they closed the gates, and I know folks in my neighborhood, Ashley Creek, and other nearby neighborhoods kind of police the park to make sure there's not parties and stuff happening down there, but the park is closed, and that's true for Stumptown as well, right? It's closed after dusk.
Dawn to dusk, yes.
So I do have a problem with people down there with car lights doing this. So I think we should be able to ask them to leave because the park's closed. But The second point I want to make is, when I've seen folks down there working out, it's small groups. I've never seen more than 15 or 20 people up to the maximum. It's not like we have battalions of soldiers or something that are hindering other folks from enjoying the park. So these are relatively small groups. I just don't see, again, it being worthwhile for the small amount of money we're going to recoup. And that's assuming that folks do apply for this $25 permit and do it faithfully. So it's going to be very difficult to enforce. It's just, again, to use one of my favorite phrases, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this one.
Mr. Melton?
I think what struck a nerve with me, and I don't know if some of my colleagues are missing it, if I'm not articulating it well enough. This isn't a group of Chris's friends who got together and pulled their money together to go rent Stumptown Park to guarantee they got a place to work out. This is a for-profit organization's business model to go in and use the park and charge fees for a facility that doesn't belong to them. They're not your run-of-the-mill, kids or citizens who are looking for a place to work out. This is that, supposedly, and what I understand, this is that company's business model. They go into towns, into parks, they develop a boot camp type fitness program, and they charge people to use it, and there's no wear and tear, there's no overhead on them. They're getting a venue for $25 an hour, which is using a facility that our citizens have paid for, and they're doing a for-profit business venture in our parks. And I guarantee if I went to most, if not all, the people in here and say, are you okay with this? I got a feeling most of them would say no, and they're looking at us to stop it. You don't get to use our parks for your for-profit business like that.
Would you say that's true even if they rented the park?
If they rented the park and covered the cost, and the costs were appropriate, that's one thing.
And I think that's what they're supposed to be doing.
But
right?
they figured out, they're going from town to town doing this, and they figured out they're gaming the system, and nobody's, Corey, you said yourself, if I'm correct, they're not renting the park anymore.
They're not.
And they're there after the park is closed, using headlights or lamps to illuminate the park. And if they're doing it and not renting it, there's no rental agreement. Somebody rolls an ankle, breaks a leg, guess who's on the hook for it? And they're not having to buy the insurance to cover it.
I guess, Mr. Melton, you can change all the words in the ordinances you want to, but if you don't,
If you're not
if you
following
can't
the
enforce it, I mean, I think that what I was hearing was that at a time when they were not renting the park, it was daylight, they were allowed to be there. The Park and Rec director said that he did not feel that he had the authority to ask them to leave the park because the ordinance wasn't clearly stated in that manner. Certainly, if they're there after dark, that's a violation. And to me, if they pay the fee to rent the park, then they should be able to use the park like anybody else can. So I just feel like this is getting into one of those things where we start chasing our tails and we're going to put words on the paper so we can feel better, but we're really not doing anything effectively to resolve the issue. That's just my 2 cents.
I mean, I do think that staff will be able to enforce if there's a change in the ordinance where we are very specific enough to where we can say this is not an allowable use of the park. I mean, our staff is confident that we could enforce it.
Okay. Mr. Query?
Yeah, question on like Food Truck Friday and that, do they pay a fee to use the park?
No, they're partnering with the town.
And I know, but officially
Yes.
they are paying a fee.
Yes.
I don't see why anybody else should get to use it free of charge if those things that are the town's really sponsoring are already paying one. I agree with Ms. Melton that there ought to be appropriate use. And if you shut the park down, I'm not sure that without town responsibility, I'm not sure we should open it back to anybody, or anybody should go out to their car lights to run it. So I agree with Mr. Melton on what he's trying to get to.
Mr. Irvin?
I think the bottom line is, no matter how distasteful it may seem to some folks, until we tighten up the ordinance or review the ordinance, the park is public. And I can't help that you have an individual or a group of individuals are abusing or gaming the system. It's distasteful, it's unfortunate, shame on them aspect of it. But if any one of, my business, if I went to take my employees down to the park and maybe we take a little break, throwing a Frisbee or something like that, or part of a, Combraco, they want to do a little team building and they want to go to the local park or something like that, I think that's the problem. I think that's that slippery slope aspect of it where we're beginning to sort of pick winners and losers. And unfortunately, there's a loser using our park and abusing the system. And I think, if anything, if we get this dusk issue resolved and get that enforced, it may solve the problem. They may move on. But frankly, I think it's public park for public use. If we find that they're damaging it or doing something like that, that rises to another level. Yes. But there's just some things in this world, especially this country, we get to use some things, and that's the public park system and all. And I would think employees that are benefiting from that, maybe citizens, and they're paying taxes as well and saying, what's the problem? So let's let Charlie and Corey do their digs and see, we'll go from there.
Just one final point from me. Food Truck Friday, they come in, do they pay a fee to be there?
Yes, they pay the department. Each truck pays a fee.
Okay, and they're making a profit. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there.
They take all the money they get from the people that pay.
All right, so let's make sure we don't impact them as well.
Correct.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is pavement condition survey. C.J. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor, Board. I went over some of this at the planning conference on Saturday, so this should be fairly familiar to you. I'll try to go through it pretty quick so you can get on to more important things. We had a pavement condition survey done in 2014 by Kircher Engineering. As you are aware, our roads degrade over time, and the rate at which they degrade changes from road to road based on various things, how they're loaded, the weather conditions, how they're paved in the beginning, all that sort of stuff changes how they degrade. So you can't just keep using that same survey year after year to figure out what you want to do for the following year. Normally, we try to redo it every 2 to 3 years because of that. It's been just over 4 years since our last pavement condition survey, and it's no longer effective, the data that we have from the last survey, for directing our work activities. So we would like to hire Kircher Engineering to come back, do another pavement condition survey, generate another report and work output for helping to direct our activities the next several years.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Higdon?
CJ, I think you and this board know that I'm probably the most stingy when it comes to funding studies. I do think this one is worthwhile, but I think we haven't done a good job of informing the public as to why it's required. When I tell our constituents, or when someone comes up to me and says, we're doing a pavement study, they say, well, tell CJ, come down my neighborhood, I'll show him where the pavement's no good, we don't need to do a study. So I don't think they understand all the nuances of this. I'd like to see, maybe Maureen can put this on our website more prominently or something as to why we're doing this, because a lot of our citizens don't understand the need for it, and certainly not the need as often as we do it. I do appreciate that you've waited 4 years to do it instead of 2 or 3, and for that reason I will support this, but I do wish we'd make a stronger effort to let our citizens know why we're doing it and the importance of it.
Yes, sir.
Is that a motion? No.
And I will add to that, I think that, Mr. Higdon is correct that we do need to get a product out of these studies, and this certainly is a good one. But on top of that, as we talked at the planning conference this past weekend, I think there was somewhat general consensus that we've gotten behind on road repairs and whatnot in Matthews, and we need to examine what's going to be required to start being more aggressive with the roads and getting our neighborhood streets repaired. And you do have some innovative ideas about that, so it was very good to see that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion?
Motion we approve and authorize town manager to contract with Kircher Engineering for an amount not to exceed $45,000 for the pavement condition survey as outlined in CJ's memo to us dated 2/20/2019.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, CJ. Next item on the agenda is the budget report. And I'll turn to the manager for that.
I would like to defer to the assistant town manager.
Just as I said that, I realized, no, the assistant town manager.
So the board has in front of them the monthly budget report. It's not reflected in what has been prepared for you. All the numbers to this point look very healthy, but the manager and I did want to raise up that last week we went to a meeting with the county to learn more about the revaluation. And while we were there, they provided us with quite a bit of data, and we noticed an anomaly in the assessed values for business personal property. This is the valuations for things like computer equipment, machinery that are taxed for businesses, and it showed a significant decrease from last year. That differs with what the county projected we would be receiving this year. So at this point, we don't know why. The county did not know why. We talked to them afterwards, but we are working with the county to try to figure out what the cause of that is and any projected impact that might have on our revenues for this year. So at this point, we just don't know. So we did just want to lift that up to the board to make them aware as soon as possible, but we do expect that by this time next month, we'll have more information that we can share.
Mr. Higdon.
Do we have any idea of the impact? Is it bigger than a bread box? Is it 10,000, 100,000, million?
Was it $60 million?
It was a $60 million difference in valuation.
Okay, so that is.
For the county?
Yeah, so to whatever, expand on what Ms. Hawk's talking about, is every year the county, it's their job to assess property in the county and all the towns, and then what we do is we take their numbers and we plug them into our system, and that's how we set the tax rate. And it startled both of us. We looked at a $60 million shortfall, and they said they were puzzled too, and they said they were going to check into it. They have not gotten back to us, and $60 million would be, let's see, I got to think about this, somewhere around 180, maybe $200,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Urban.
Becky or Hazen, just real quickly, obviously this fund balance appropriation, it makes up the delta difference between the 24.7 and the 22.2 million. What was all involved, again, on that 2.2 million fund balance appropriation? I'm sure that was a myriad of items, but it was probably a lot to do with a decision on the 60 percentile and all.
So some of this is, as I recall, a big chunk of it is money for paving. So what we did not spend last year, we reappropriated it into this year's budget. The intention is or was to spend all of it. We did not spend all of it. And on the advice, I talked to CJ, I may be giving you more information you care about another paving project this year. And CJ said, if we want to get a better price, he would recommend we wait till next fiscal year. So we actually get the paving done after July 1st, because there's going to be so much pressure from other communities to get the paving done before July 1st. So in my mind, if we can get a cheaper product, it just goes into the next fiscal year. I told him I didn't think that was a problem.
So it's really fiscal year 1920 we're talking about? Because we're in 1819. So you're talking about the 1920 aspect, and that's why this is the budget amended, went up to 24.7.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a mayor's report. We attended the North Carolina League of Municipalities meeting in Raleigh last week. Mr. Urban went, Mr. Query, myself, Mr. Miller, and the manager. And we had an opportunity to meet with our House representative and our senator while we were there. Both of them were very accommodating, had conference rooms set up for us, and spent well over an hour with us discussing different issues and interests of the town. We then attended a dinner that night with the league. Unfortunately, I think some of the speakers were under the weather, and so some substitutions needed to be made. But all in all, I think the opportunity to speak with our legislatures. Rachel Hunt did join us for dinner. Dan Bishop, Senator Bishop, was under the weather and met with us, but told us that he wasn't going to make it to dinner, and I fully understood that. So very good and worthwhile effort, and we traveled safely and got back, and everything went well. So next week, I want to remind everyone, and Jeff is the primary on this, is the COG meeting is next week, next Friday out at UNC Charlotte. So if you want to go to that, I think you can still sign up. But Jeff and Hazen are going to the pre-meeting on Thursday, and then at this point, I'll be attending the Friday meeting with them. And I'm not sure, Lori, if anybody else had signed up. Okay, and Becky will be going too. Very good. Attorney's report.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Real quickly, a nice segue with the league and with your attendance. The North Carolina Municipal Attorneys Winter Conference is going to be March 21st and 22nd, and I would like permission again to attend using the town's travel policy as guiding my trip.
Do we need to make a motion to that effect?
You do.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Is this that conference in Chapel Hill?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, it's only because I like you, Charlie, that I let you go to Chapel Hill.
I don't even need a car.
Sure you want to go?
I don't even need a car to get there. I'll just be floating right along there.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Town manager's report.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
second. You guys are going to make me do it. Any discussion?
No, sir.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.